President Trump received a lavish welcome as he arrived in Saudi Arabia today. And jurors in Sean Combs' federal sex trafficking trial have heard opening statements and testimony from two witnesses. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. President Trump has arrived in Saudi Arabia, starting a 4-day trip to the region. He was escorted to the King's Royal Court by guards riding Arabian horses. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports on the lavish welcome Trump has received.
President Trump has been welcomed in Saudi Arabia, including an F-15 fighter jet escort to the airport. The Saudi government gave him a second extravagant reception at the royal court, where the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman greeted Trump at the foot of a lavender carpet. Each of the nation's national anthems were played, and the leaders reviewed divisions of the Saudi military. Trump and the Crown Prince then walked together into the royal court for a state visit. The leaders then took a moment to say hello and shake hands with the many attendees, including Saudi notables and an extensive list of U.S. CEOs, including Elon Musk, Sam Altman of OpenAI, and Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Riyadh.
The federal sex trafficking trial against Sean Combs resumes today in New York City. NPR's Isabella Gomez Sarmiento reports. This follows yesterday's opening statements and testimony from two witnesses.
Prosecutors alleged that Sean Combs used his businesses to carry out and cover up crimes. His defense attorneys argued that the rapper and music mogul was in toxic relationships that had nothing to do with his companies. After opening arguments, two government witnesses testified. First, a Los Angeles police officer who was working as a hotel security guard in 2016 described how he responded to an altercation between Combs and his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Video of the incident, which shows Combs kicking and dragging Ventura, has been widely viewed since CNN obtained and released a version of it last year. Then, a man who claims Ventura paid him for sexual encounters that Combs watched took the stand. He said he witnessed Combs violently attack Ventura more than once. Isabella Gomez Sarmiento, NPR News.
Israel is sending mediators to Qatar for talks to try to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. The U.S. is trying to jumpstart negotiations after Hamas released a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen from captivity in Gaza. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
21-year-old Edan Alexander is undergoing tests at an Israeli hospital. He spoke with President Trump on the phone, according to U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. The U.S. negotiated directly with Hamas for his release from Gaza. He's the first Israeli soldier Hamas has freed since capturing about 250 hostages in the October 7, 2023 attacks. Israeli negotiators are meeting for talks in Qatar. They want to work from a previous U.S. proposal for Hamas to release half of its remaining living hostages and then to discuss the terms of ending the war. After a pause in airstrikes to facilitate Alexander's release, Israel resumed attacks in Gaza, targeting Hamas, including at a hospital. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The Episcopal Church has announced it will end its decades-long partnership with the U.S. government. This came after the church was asked to resettle a group of white South Africans who've arrived in the U.S. Jack Jenkins of Religion News Service reports the Trump administration has designated them as refugees.
Episcopal Church presiding bishop, the Most Reverend Sean W. Rowe, explained in a letter that the request crossed a moral line, citing the church's, quote, steadfast commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and our historic ties with the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. The Episcopal Church is part of the Anglican Communion, a global religious body. Famous leaders include the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the celebrated opponent of apartheid in South Africa. Rowe also voiced frustration with the U.S. government for essentially freezing the refugee program since January. Afrikaners are among the very few allowed in since Trump took office. For NPR News, I'm Jack Jenkins in Washington.
This was produced through a collaboration between NPR and Religion News Service. Separately, the Trump administration says that it will end protections against deportation for people from Afghanistan. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says that Afghanistan's security situation and its economy are improving. Critics say that Afghanistan remains fully under Taliban control. They say Afghans in the U.S. face persecution if they return, especially if the Afghans help the U.S. against Taliban militants. A federal judge has refused to block the Internal Revenue Service from sharing immigrants' tax data with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. NPR's Jasmine Garge reports ICE could use the data from the IRS to find and deport people who are illegally in the U.S.
There are restrictions on what kind of information ICE can request from the IRS, but U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich, a Trump appointee, has denied a preliminary injunction. The decision comes weeks after IRS Commissioner Melanie Krause resigned over a deal to allow ICE to use IRS tax records to identify immigrants without legal status in the U.S. ICE has said working with the IRS is strictly for major criminal cases. Various nonprofit groups argued that immigrants who pay taxes are entitled to the same privacy as U.S. citizens, regardless of their legal status. They argue that to do otherwise threatens the privacy of all Americans. Jasmine Garst, NPR News, New York.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average soared more than 1,100 points yesterday on news that the U.S. and China will significantly lower their triple-digit tariffs. The Trump administration will also lower tariffs on cheaper goods from China and Hong Kong to 54%. This could affect items bought from Chinese companies like Temu and Shein. NPR's Scott Horsley says the on-again, off-again nature of President Trump's tariffs have made investors very uneasy.
Import taxes can go up or down or sideways, and businesses and consumers just have to try to make the best of it. That uncertainty about future tariffs also, makes it hard to decide, is it worth moving a factory out of China or running the expense of building a plant in the U.S.?
NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. The U.S. Energy Department wants to eliminate or weaken 47 regulations, including some energy efficiency standards for appliances. NPR's Jeff Brady reports advocates for those standards say some of the proposed rule changes violate the law.
Energy Secretary Chris Wright says the Trump administration is slashing regulations that he claims restrict consumer choice. He plans to rescind conservation standards for kitchen appliances, washers and dryers, and more. Andrew Delaski of the Appliance Standards Awareness Project says that will increase energy costs. And he says the law bars backsliding on such standards. They can only become more efficient.
And that was to provide regulatory certainty for manufacturers and to ensure that consumers would see, consistent improvement in energy efficiency over time.
Delaski says if the proposals are finalized, they likely will be challenged in court. Jeff Brady, NPR News.
This is NPR.